We have a very distinguished panel tonight, some of whom you've already had a chance to hear. Jean Manning, who we heard earlier. Tom Vallone, who you also heard earlier. And Brian O'Leary. Is Brian around? Not yet, okay. Then we have people you haven't met yet. One of them is a board member of the New Energy Movement, Andrew Mount. And Andrew's had a very interesting history. He was an assistant and associate to one of the early new energy inventors, Bruce De Palma. Spent many years with him in New Zealand. And he's also been involved with new energy in this country, a whole range of activities, and he continues his quest. And you're quite welcome. Yeah, so join us, Andrew. And then finally, Peter Lindeman. We're delighted that he's here because he was originally going to be one of our speakers and had family matters that he thought were going to keep him from coming here. Peter's been a long-time student and inventor in the field, particularly working on cold electricity, and he's written about that. He has videos, and he's worked on systems with some of the other distinguished people in the field. And for a long time, he served on the board of directors at Borderline Sciences Research Foundation, and he's a research associate of another distinguished scientist in the field, Dr. Robert Adams in New Zealand, and as well as a close collaborator with Trevor James Constable in the United States. He really is one of our leading authorities on ether technology, and we're delighted to have him. It looks like I was going to have the luxury of sitting, but I'm going to stand instead. That way, from this vantage point, I can keep track of these guys.
Plus, you've got the schedule.
Huh?
You've got the itinerary.
Right. The topic of our panel, which will last until 8 o'clock, and we hope to have much time for audience participation, is the whole area that was touched upon so well earlier in the evening and the day of new energy, the promise, and the obstacles. And to start us off, I want each panel member just to briefly touch on, I think we've had a lot on the promise. And while not making too much of the obstacles, because we know, thanks to Steve Greer, that the end is certain. It's just a matter of how we go through the rocky shoals to get there. But if they could pick out one particular obstacle that they have found most significant and start our discussion just suggesting what new energy movement might contribute to dealing with that obstacle. And I think I'll start right here with Tom Vallone, if you would. Just a few minutes.
So I understand the question is, the topic that we should address is picking one obstacle and looking at how your movement,
new energy movement might make a contribution to dealing with that.
Well, there's so many obstacles. Of course, Stephen Greer covered several of them. And is my mic on? Yeah, I think it's on, but I'm not close enough away. Well, I will try to talk closer to the mic and also pull this from the table. The one that comes to mind initially, which is a group project, besides the technical emphasis that we pointed out in my presentation, is essentially the lobbying and the advocacy. I'm almost up too high on the mic here. I'm getting feedback as well. But the advocacy and the lobbying is something that I find difficult, and it also requires a group like yours to be effective in doing it. For example, the National Rifle Association. If something happens that the NRA doesn't like, what do? Man, they just tell the members to go bombard Senator so-and-so with a bunch of letters, and he folds, period. So we should have the same power. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. In other words, you identify a cause. For example, Union of Concerned Scientists has a very significant cause, and it's called scientific integrity. We can't report exactly what we've been reporting at this conference with the gag order that it currently exists in Washington. The reports don't get out, the politicians don't get the truth, and the government agencies can't report the truth. This is the worst situation scientists have ever faced. And that's why the Union of Concerned Scientists have made a big deal about it and got scientists to sign petitions. I signed the petition, lots of people have, and I've even offered, which now they're doing, to get things like this at George Washington University, where I volunteered to be one of the speakers. There's several other universities to promote that topic. So my point is, having more of these meetings could be helpful, but simply writing letters to your senator and congressman. How many people here even know the address of their senator or congressman? Not even half. And that's a travesty. All of you who want to be effective in getting Washington to do something really need to do that. For example, offering tax breaks. Solar tax credits were a big incentive. Wind energy tax credits were a big incentive until they were discontinued with this present administration. And oftentimes, new energy technology isn't quite up to competing with the wholesale rate of about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And you have to be below that to be competitive. So this is the bottom line that marketing people need. And if the tax break throws in another cent or two in that equation, that can be a big incentive to getting the struggling industry, which is one of ours, anyone you pick, the magnetic motor, the nuclear battery, whatever it's called, to get that to the market in a big way. Because wind energy for years was climbing faster than any other technology. And it was really because of the tax credit, and it leveled off as soon as the tax credit got discontinued. So your letters to your congressman are very serious and very effective, especially when there's legislation you can provoke. Like many of your representatives also have a local Portland office that you can approach. You don't have to write to Washington, in other words, to get your voice heard. And those are the people to go talk to. I've done that in the DC area. I find my Maryland rep in the office easier to approach than calling the downtown Capitol Hill staffer, who is hard to reach and hard to get an earful. So these are suggestions to really work on, and there's plenty more. I could keep going.
As a former legislative aide to a United States Senator, I want to second that. You'd be surprised how few letters focused on an issue that hasn't surfaced yet will bring it right up and attention will be paid to it. An intelligent letter about an issue that's not yet been addressed or adequately addressed. I want to not have interaction on any particular point now, but just go right down, and I'm going to shift now to the other end of the table and ask Brian to just pick out one of the obstacles, and if it's the same one and you have something to add, great, and how NEM might relate to that.
Oh, wow. Obstacles. Is my mic on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, wow. Well, they're everywhere. My selection is the community from which I came and still am a scientist. I consider myself a scientist, even though I've been denied privileges of the priesthood. And that usually is the first objection, and that, of course, is the work that Gene Malov did, which I'm so saddened by his death. And that was the area that he addressed more than any other. Now, we heard from Tom about the Thomas Kuhn book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And you see, I'm a PhD astronomer and physicist. I've published 100 peer-reviewed papers. It's almost like I've been defrocked. Well, I have been. And that's just me, my personal experience. It's okay for me to be defrocked. But it's not okay for scientists to have a knee-jerk reaction to new ideas. It's not okay. It's a culturally conditioned reality that has always existed since the time of Galileo, and we're now seeing it in spades. So I was invited, encouraged. It's like inventors coming out of the woodwork. I'm in George Nuri, and 500 emails come my way. I got the answer, I got the answer, I got the answer, I got the answer, I got the answer. And I say, oh boy, that would be fine. If New Energy Movement could get funded, maybe we could address some of those issues. But you see, I've been inundated by a segment of society that's crying out to be heard. And on the other hand, I've been defrocked from the very society that I was an active part of for so many years. So what do we do about it? And what do we do about these scientists that are flies in the ointment, forming an unwitting alliance with the powers that be, which are driving the earth to its end? What do we do about that? And the answer is found in sociology, studies of cultural systems that have happened since the beginning of time. And for us to be dumbed down and stupid about that issue is part of the problem. So how do we deal with these scientists? This is what Gene was doing. If you read the last few issues of Infinite Energy magazine and some of his articles, you can really see that he was on to something. And we need to continue that spirit, which is that basically most of the naysaying scientists are just plain wrong. I know that. I've been in the laboratories of these people. So was Gene. So were a lot of us. And we were trained as scientists. And yet, the closer I felt I got to the truth, the more pushed away I felt from the culture. So the guardians to the gates of reality are the scientists themselves. And so we may need to redefine what is meant by science. People that call themselves scientists are more like technicians of a certain element of our culture. And so it's incumbent on those of us that still are and were scientists to point that out. And it's my greatest gratitude is that this conference came off at all, and that we're here. And every journey starts with small steps, and we're on a big journey here. You can see this. You can see the energy here, the energy, the desire to make this planet a cleaner place. And so those are the people that are now like the foremost guardians to the gate. I had the opportunity, and I have for 35 years, since the time that George McGovern ran for president. I was his energy advisor when he ran for president. And I've been the energy advisor of Mo Udall and Fritz Mondale and countless people. I'm now retirement age, and I'm saying, yeah, it's time to sit in a hammock. But to also reflect on how, in our time, scientists have, people that call themselves scientists, have objected and resisted this to the bitter end. And believe me, this is a cultural conditioning that has so mesmerized us and dumbed us down. How do we get around this? This is probably the biggest obstacle of all. And as I said before, I had the opportunity through Tom, thank you, Tom, to come to Washington and brief Kerry's energy people. But I've kind of run out of energy to do that. And so part of my vision of the new energy movement is that it be a social movement, a movement that would support a grassroots upswelling of public indignation about what's happening, and at the same time offering solutions.
Great.
So we can get around these stuffy scientists. Now the media will continue to listen to them. I know that.
Well,
Because my own access to the media has stopped as soon as I began to take this position.
this might be then a perfect segue to Jean Manning. We talked a little bit before the panel, and she, as a journalist who's done so much to inform the world about new energy, might have some words about the media and its helpfulness or lack thereof.
Yes, and I know you have too, Steve. Your efforts to get articles in the newspapers and magazines are sometimes met with frustrating results. And I agree with Brian that it's just often the scientists are behind it, because when I worked for a newspaper, we would, say an inventor, I didn't really have this exact thing happen to me, but similar things where you don't really know, you're just a general reporter, and this is a specialty that someone's coming in with a story. Well, you call the nearest university, nearest college, and ask for the head of the department connected with that, and the expert tells you. And in the case of a new energy invention, it would be, don't be deluded, and you'd get the impression also from your editor, who dealt with this sort of thing for a long time, that the way to treat this was to either ignore it or to do a humorous item, just to show you how witty you can be and in a light lifestyle story. And a lot of inventors have really been hurt by their contact with the media. They naively thought that they would get even-handed treatment and that their story would be told with truth, but it doesn't turn out that way. So I've given a lot of thought to this, because I think that we need a critical mass of consciousness to be supportive of the very thought of a more enlightened civilization. What they get through the media nowadays doesn't give much inspiration that there could be hope for anything better. It's kind of everything's going downhill and here's all the evidence and the casualties. And so I think that we have to do an end run around the regular media, because they're locked up and at this point not helpful. So where's the alternative? There's the indie media, the independent media. Go online and just look up indie media. And each of you can contribute to this yourselves by the discussions that you get in online, and the way things are whipping around the planet these days over the internet. You can have an amazing influence if you put out some insightful commentary on an online discussion. You'd be surprised how far it can get. And also, I think that the creativity of all the people in the arts, Sean Galloway can sing a song about new energy. Artists can paint inspirational paintings of what a better world would look like. And I think that we have to build up a positive imaging of a better world and really put energy into that. And I think of the old song goes, if you got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how can you have a dream come true? We have to have a picture and put energy into the picture of what we want.
Those of you who are in Oregon, or those of you who are visiting and still here for a while, you might want to pick up on the newsstands around town a publication called sentient times. And Gene has written an excellent article about new energy and as our birthright in that issue. Just out of curiosity, yes, New Connections has a wonderful article by the very distinguished Joel Garvin, who really said it like it is about being a citizen, and really appreciate that. I'm just out of curiosity, since the press came up, are there any members of the press here?
Any members of the CIA? After hearing Steve Greer?
Now, it's really clear that a great effort was made to get the Oregonian here and Willamette Week and so forth, and we were met, and I've had this problem with the Oregonian for some time. We were met with not even benign indifference, and they've been adequately informed about these things for years, and they just simply really refuse to take it seriously. One slight suggestion you might do is, if a number of you wrote letters about how important this conference was and how valuable it was to hear about things that you hadn't heard about in the media, and if we had enough of them sent to the Oregonian, for example, maybe one of them would be published, a small step. It's huh? Very good.
Do we have two?
Excellent. And please, when you do write these letters, send a copy to us here at New Energy Movement. Okay, I want to turn to Peter Lindeman next. And Peter, you have a freebie here. Oh, whatever, whatever is on your mind about all this.
Okay. What I'd like to do is look at the core question is, what can this movement do in overcoming obstacles? I know that everybody here really would love to see this new energy future come about as quickly as possible. Anybody who agrees with that, raise their hand. Okay, but I also sense that with Steve Greer getting up here and saying, well, they need $10 million and everything, everybody else sort of out here feels like, well, what can I do? Is there anything that I can do? I don't have $10 million. I don't understand these technologies. What can I do now that will help bring this about? How many feel that way? Oh, I'm very disappointed with this group over here. And this comes back to what Brian just said, and that this movement should be a social movement. And what that means is that we really don't have a technology problem. The technology is here. Stephen has said, it's sitting in 100 places, and there's thousands of inventors working on duplicating all that and coming up with more stuff all the time. The technology has been here, it has been suppressed, it has been reinvented, and it keeps coming up because the divine forces just constantly are infusing the human mind with these solutions. And these solutions have to do with cooperating with nature and living on the planet in a cooperative manner. And it really boils down to, it boils down to us. Do we agree to live cooperatively with each other? This is what the real problem is. The reason the governments don't want this technology out is because of its potential weaponization, and because they stand to lose power in the gigantic geopolitical competitive arena. And that's what has to be bypassed. We're not looking for the scientists who have a political agenda to disagree with whether this technology exists. Those of us, Tom and some of us who've been doing this for 20, 30 years, at first thought, well, first we needed to prove this stuff to the scientists and show them how the laws of thermodynamics don't really apply and all these things. And no matter what you show them, they won't take it as proof. And so what you see is that we're not trying to, because there's not a level playing field at the science level. Brian found that out. So basically what we really need to do is just bypass it. Anybody who wants to deny that this exists, just go on and talk to somebody else. Because they're going to be left in the dust. This is a real thing that's happening on this planet. You know, God has been trying to make this technology happen on this planet for over 100 years and continues to make the inventions appear. And what's happening is we have a small group of people who call themselves the rulers of the planet, who want to stand between God's abundance and God's children and steal what God gives to the planet for free and sell it to the rest of us. And that's not okay. And we enable them to do that by staying in a competitive mode with each other. And if you want to make this happen, what you can do right now without $10 million is start agreeing, is start being less competitive and more cooperative with everything you do, every day, every decision, every action. That is what's going to make this happen in this world. This is an obstacle that is holding this back. And this is something that each one of us can overcome, because that's something that we can do. So that's one obstacle.
I just want to put a footnote. Anybody who raised their hand when they replied to Peter's question about their feeling about power here forgets the center of power that each of you are in terms of networking. I know that in this room, at 7 degrees of separation, or maybe even less, you know of someone who knows of someone who knows of someone that has the resources to contribute to this cooperative endeavor. So never doubt your power. Margaret Mead once made a famous saying that I'll badly paraphrase, but she said, never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. Indeed, that is the only thing that has ever happened.
That's right. One other little point that I'd like to bring up about how this can really work. And I just focus back on the real history of how